Very good morning to you. It feels a bit like, well, the morning after the night before. This is the Newsroom show. We'll be with you once again until midday today when we will be handing over to, of course, the memorial service of Joost van der Westhuizen and at Loftus Versfeld a little bit later. But we have a big order of business ahead of us today, Elvis.
Continuation of the State of the Nation address last night, Eben, that's what our focus is today, really on what happened last night and especially on the security situation in Parliament during President Jacob Zuma's State of the Nation address last night. And there were some alarm bells, some say, for the democracy in South Africa. So there's a question that we pose to you.
Interesting question.
Absolutely, and I think it just goes to the heart of the matter. And we're asking you, what do you think? Is Parliament being held to ransom?
That's the poll that we're running. Is Parliament being held to ransom right now? We're asking you to vote. A lot of you have voted. 223 votes in. Very interesting that 50% of our viewers are saying, no, Parliament's not being held to ransom. This is just normal business in South Africa. And 50% say, yes, the work of Parliament is really being hampered by the kinds of fisticuffs and bricks that we're seeing in Parliament, Elvis. Were you surprised at all? I think people maybe are suffering a little bit of Parliament shenanigans fatigue, isn't it?
Yeah, you know, I wasn't surprised, I can tell you that, because we understand that there was something going to happen. The EFF made their pronouncements very clear in the run-up to the SONA that something will happen, and it happened last night again. Of course, we saw all the shenanigans in Parliament, we saw all the brutality, them being removed from the House.
Yeah, the question of the day is on the order of business, because at the end of the day, South Africa is open for business and we have to continue. All of you yesterday had many questions and many things you wanted the President to address. So we ask you, has the President's SONA 2017 speech met your expectations? If it hasn't, tweet us and tell us what you wanted or what you thought the President did not address during SONA 2017 last night.
There's already some responses to that question, Eben, so let's take a look at what you have to say. Siafana says, yebo yes. Of course, he spoke about water and sanitation. Siafana is a very happy man this morning.
And Michael Jambasakave reckons SONA 2017 not yet, because I was expecting fees must fall issue to be solved once and for all.
Yeah, Michael, it's going to be a difficult conversation still. Of course, the Commission is still busy doing its work. JJ comes and he says, happy to watch the Honourable President unpacking the SONA. It is a SONA that gives hope to millions of South African people, says JJ.
Lachasa says, I feel very ashamed about what had happened yesterday. Our Parliament is operating with no constitution. Hey bo! ANC no, says
Lachasa. Is it a fact of no constitution or no respect for the constitution? These are the
because we need to have responsibility. We can't just have rights, and that is the responsibility that we talk about.
That is the secret to it all. With rights come responsibilities, and we all as citizens of South Africa have responsibility to behave in an acceptable way for our fellow citizens, isn't that true?
100%, and especially if you're in leadership, you need to be exemplary, because there are thousands upon thousands of people watching what you do.
Especially young people in South Africa. That's where we're at. At SABC Newsroom, you can tweet us, you can tell us what we think. Of course, we're going to look at both the economics and political aspects of the address over the next couple of hours. But first, let's get the top stories.
The DA is expected to challenge the deployment of the SANDF and police to Parliament during the State of the Nation address in court today. South African rugby legend Joost van der Westhuizen will be remembered in a public memorial service at Loftus Versfeld in Pretoria today. And the United States President Donald Trump has promised a legal battle after a federal appeals court refused to restore his controversial executive order on immigration. Well, there you have it. Those are some of your stories coming up. But before we get to the news, let's find out from Kendall what's happening today. And it's a big day, not just for South Africa, but for a lot of people around the world that knew Joost van der Westhuizen.
You know, Elvis, once again, you know when sport makes it into the general news headlines, you know it's a big day. It could be a celebration or it could be something really heartbreaking and sad like today. We're looking at the death of Joost van der Westhuizen and the memorial service that's going to be held in Loftus Versfeld, and that's one of our big stories. You know, And that's what we'll be doing today. We'll be crossing over live to Simon Burke, who's going to be at the Loftus Versfeld to give us an update on what's happening with that particular memorial service for iconic Bulls and scrum half and Springbok World Cup winner US van der Westhuizen, who will be laid to rest today after that public memorial service at his beloved Loftus Versfeld Stadium. And this is what else is coming up in the world of sports.
Terrific piece of ball striking that.
Intent on a serious whitewash, the Proteas will not be taking their foot off the pedal when they play Sri Lanka in the 5th and final ODI this afternoon in Centurion. And that Olympic legacy in Brazil is but a pipe dream. It's just 6 months after Rio hosted the Olympics. Game venues sit idle and already in disrepair. Of course, in that first hour when we do sports at 10:40, we'll be crossing over to Simon at Loftus, but everything else will be playing in more detail in the sports bulletin. For now, it is back to Elvis, who's got the news.
Thank you, Kendall. Top story this hour. President Jacob Zuma's State of the Nation address was delayed by over an hour last night amid chaotic scenes in Parliament. Countless points of order brought mainly by the EFF delayed the proceedings. Parliamentary Speaker Baleka Mbete eventually summoned the guards to eject the EFF and most of the rest of the opposition that walked out. Now, when his speech got underway, President Zuma promised a radical economic transformation.
Let us unite in driving radical economic transformation for the good of our country.
It was no secret that President Zuma's State of the Nation address would dwell on the economy. 22 years later, ownership patterns remain largely in favor of the minority, and the majority is still struggling to make ends meet. And his government is tackling the situation head-on.
There can be no sustainability in any economy if the majority is excluded in this manner. In my discussions with the business community, they accepted these transformation imperatives.
And big construction companies who normally get fingered for collusion will be compelled to subcontract small black companies. And legislation to unlock economic potential is being brought in.
As a start, the new regulations making it compulsory for big constructors to subcontract 30% of business to black-owned enterprises have been finalized and were gazetted on the 20th of January.
As the information plays an important role in today's livelihoods, the president hinted at lowering data costs.
We assured the youth that the lowering of the cost of data is uppermost in our policies and plans.
The process to expedite land reform was also high on the speech, but he's referred the bill on expropriation of land back to Parliament. There are concerns on inadequate public participation.
I have now decided to refer the bill back to Parliament for reconsideration on the basis that the bill might not pass constitutional muster.
The president has also emphasized his administration's resolve to address student funding challenges. Last year saw mass protests over funding of higher education.
As soon as the broadest sections of our society agree on what to do, our government will take steps to prioritize resources to implement it on a phased basis.
The crime was also highlighted. The president also announced that Mpumalanga province will also get its own high court. Last year, Limpopo province had its own high court officially opened.
The coming into operation of these two high courts means that we have now realized the goal of high court in every province of the country.
The president may have hit the right notes on key issues aimed at transforming the country's economy, but many will be watching whether the words are matched by actions. Mzwandile Mbethe, SABC News, Parliament.
Now, there's not been much new economic data this week. The mining and manufacturing output December figures suggest that underlying demand and confidence remain weak. And on the other hand, the South African Chamber of Commerce and Industry's monthly business confidence rose slightly in January. That's the good news. Now, that was mainly as a result of better commodity prices and higher new vehicle sales. Important events this week included the Africa Mining Indaba in Cape Town. Then there was the announcement about the national minimum wage of 20 Rand per hour as from May 2018. But the dominant event, of course, President's State of the Nation address last night to Parliament. So, to discuss this and other factors relating to the economy, we are joined by economist Professor Raymond Parsons from the Northwest University School of Business and Governance, the SBG, in our weekly slot of the economy. Professor, very good morning to you. And
good morning, Elvis.
First and foremostly, there seems to be, let's first start with the economic figures before we get to the State of the Nation address, because there's a lot to unpack there. It seems to me there's the mining and manufacturing figures for December that came out. Your take on that?
Well, I think if you take those figures together with some of the more recent figures for the month of January, I think it's a mixed picture. But as we've said before, I think we've reached a bottom turning point. It looks as if the worst is over. Also, if you look at the agricultural sector, it's raining and those prospects are so much better. And that's why, of course, the forecasts for our growth rate this year are more than they were or will be for last year. So I think what these figures are really saying is that we should expect a little better economic news this year. Perhaps not enough for all the things we want to do, but we seem to think that the worst might be over as far as 2017 is concerned.
Now, it was a long walk, but we finally are there. The national minimum wage. The scene is now set for that to be implemented next year, May. What's your take on this, and what's the next step?
Well, I think everyone must understand that although there is a target date of May next year, it has still got to go through quite a complicated process before it's finalized, because NEDLAC does not take any decisions. It's an advisory body, it's a consultative body, which has done an excellent job in bringing the social partners and the government together on this issue of a national minimum wage. Together with some expertise, there was a special panel that has come up with the 20 Rand an hour or 3,500 a month figure. Now, it obviously still has to be signed off now by COSATU, who has some reservations still apparently, because it is part of a bigger package about labor relations and how to manage strikes more successfully. So it is part of a bigger passage. Then it's got to go into legislation. And then it's got to go to Parliament. And Parliament will have hearings. And everyone must make their input. What do they think of the labour package? What do they think of the national minimum wage? The big dilemma, of course, in all this debate about the minimum wage, it's too low to guarantee a living wage, but it's too high to ensure that all businesses can afford it and keep all the jobs intact. That's the big dilemma. So we've had to arrive at a figure which is a compromise. And for some people, it's not a satisfactory compromise, but we need a floor. We need a basic platform from which we can look over the next few years and see how will this work out. We have to chew it and see in South African circumstances.
And then, of course, last night was the big night for the President's State of the Nation address. How far do you think South Africa has progressed overall since the commitment by the President last year that South Africa must be a preferred investment destination for investors?
Well, Elvis, you'll recall that we've said before here that in South Africa, I've said that the GDP is not only the gross domestic product, it's also the gross domestic politics. And last night it was very gross. So I think we've got to say that was not a happy situation. And if you're sitting in the boardrooms of the world, it's not the sort of image of South Africa that you've had or would like to see. But there are other countries that often also have certain incidents in their parliament, so we aren't alone. We just don't want to be in that club, and we should try to avoid that. That said, I think there are a lot of expectations about the State of the Nation address that are misunderstood. And the President himself has referred to this. He said, look, I'm reporting back on the past 12 months. What did I say a year ago? What do I want to say now in terms of what has been achieved or what has not been achieved? And I think in that sense, one has to be realistic about those options. Now, I said earlier that our economic climate is a little better this year, and some of it may be attributable to the fact that there was a great determination in last year's State of the Nation address to improve our investment climate, to work with business, to fend off the credit rating agencies. So those are all boxes we can tick in a positive way. There are other negatives, of course. We're not out of the woods yet. But I think the important point about the State of the Nation address is to understand that this is a working agenda. It's about work in progress. It's not necessarily about the big visions and the big road ahead, although there were references to that. As the President himself has said, I'm reporting. It's my report card of what I've done or not done over the past 12 months.
Eben?
Prof, I just want to come in. After the chaos that we said, we just saw the pictures, of course, on screen with chaotic scenes beamed all around the world. The rand dropped quite sharply after what happened in Parliament last night. How do investors, the world, the wider world, and business, how does it view the kind of things that we saw in Parliament yesterday?
Well, as I said at the outset, I think it's not a favourable image. It's something we need to avoid. South Africa must not project the image of a dysfunctional parliament. Really, with the wonderful constitution we have, which we take so much pride in, and which was so seriously negotiated on behalf of everyone, we really must see our parliament as being able to live up to the values of that whole system, and to ensure that it sends out an image that it can go about its business robustly, of course. That's what democracy is all about. But that there are rules for everyone, and the more you are seen to be applying those rules, the better the image you create.
I just wanted to talk about what the President spoke about in business. We've had a kind of social contract in South Africa for the last 20-odd years that I think we've all agreed on. For me, it sounded as if in business we were going to have a little bit of change with regards to the radical changes that are coming, even around issues of sharing the wealth, or the wealth must benefit the majority of South Africans, these kinds of conversations. Are we now seeing a change to maybe what we can call a more egalitarian kind of capitalism that's coming, or is it even further to the left of that?
Eben, I would say, look, I don't think there's any of us who would deny what needs to be done in South Africa. There are people who are watching this interview who are unemployed, who are poor, and who want better aspirations for the future. So they want speeches that will resonate, but above all, they want policies that will make a difference. But there are many ways of achieving that. And I think where there is disagreement is, do you think that a government can do more and more on a wider and wider front and then do it better? Can it deliver on its promises? That's the important point. Or must it mobilize some of the people whom it sometimes demonizes, namely the business community? I often say, you don't have to love capitalists, use them. Let them help you to get the job done. And that's where the issues of this relationship with the private sector, developing public sector and private sector partnerships is tremendously important in uplifting the people and ensuring that what you promise will be delivered.
Trust is a problem though, isn't it?
It is a problem, it has been for some years, ever since 1994, but it ebbs and flows. That's one of the reasons why NEDLAC, although it's not perfect, and sometimes it's also dysfunctional, is tremendously important, because that's where the building blocks of social cohesion can also be laid. Not only NEDLAC, we need it in our whole the great risk we have at the moment, from an economic and a political point of view, is the degree of polarization which enters into every debate, even debates where there should be robust but not fundamental differences about what to do.
When we talk about the economics of politics, Professor, when we look at what happened last night and where we stand right now as a country, is there perhaps a sense that there's a lower level of policy uncertainty in the country?
Well, I think after last night, although a lot of it, I think one keeps thinking that new ground was broken. In fact, all that's happened is that some of the proposals that were already on paper are being more aggressively presented, because I think there's a feeling that out there's a lot of dissatisfaction about delivery. Things are not happening, that the economic numbers are not good enough. We need to do much better. I mean, I know that the President spoke about wanting a 1.3 growth rate this year, as if that was good news. I mean, it's better news, but it's not good news. We need to do a lot better if we want to create the jobs, and if we want to indeed try and make a better life for everyone. But the issue of uncertainty, I think we need to say that you need to take the State of the Nation address together with the budget, together with the possibility of a cabinet reshuffle and the revisit of the credit rating agencies later in the year. Then you will know whether the sum total of uncertainty in South Africa has increased or whether it has decreased. And therefore, will you get the investment, especially the private investment you need to move this economy forward?
Let's talk about radical economic transformation. What does it actually mean? And for the layman in the street, can you break it down for us?
Well, for the layman in the street, whether he's employed or not, whether he's poor or less poor, he wants a bigger share of the cake, and he's entitled to a bigger share of the cake. But if the cake isn't big enough, there's not much point in trying to carve up the crumbs. So I think the important point here is, yes, we do need transformation, but no, don't do it in a way that now is going to push you from the frying pan into the fire. We need, to use the cliche, a cake that is growing more rapidly. And that is the issue to which we must all be dedicated. Not just business, government and labor, but the man in the street. What the National Development Plan calls active citizens. We must all grab the opportunities to develop and to also create jobs. And for this, you need the collaboration of government and the private sector in particular, but of society at large. You need a cohesive society that works as a team to create better times.
Did you find any surprises in the speech last night, Professor? And if so, to what extent will that affect the address of the budget coming up on the 22nd of February?
Well, I think, Elvis, we must remember, and I think the President himself said this, he didn't sit down a sort of week or two before the State of the Nation address, and, with a clean sheet of paper and say to his advisors, what do I say? There were statements issued by the ANC early in January. Then there was an NEC Lekgotla. Then there was a Cabinet Lekgotla. These are all building blocks to the 12-point plan that eventually was reflected in the State of the Nation address. So there were no surprises. And I also come back to the point that not only did we see the ground being prepared for what he said, but also he's reporting back on what he did last year. So it's familiar terrain. The question is, how are we going to implement this? Where will the shoe pinch? And above all, some of the proposals, to the extent that even they emerged from the Lekgotla, to what extent have they already been budgeted for? In other words, do they affect the challenges already in the budget that are probably going to see an increase in the tax burden? Now, are these proposals, some of them, which were in the State of the Nation address, are they going to be captured in the budget numbers? Or to put it more bluntly, will they all be affordable? It's one thing to state them, it's another thing to make them happen. And although the President has said we'll find the resources, the fact is that there are limits. There are limits, and we need to prioritize as to what we want to devote our resources to and what do we want to do in order to ensure growth prospects out of which all the good things must ultimately come.
A final thought, Professor?
Well, I would just come back to the point that I said earlier, that the State of the Nation address sets a broad scene, but there are other very important developments which will affect our economic performance equally, if not more fundamentally, as the year unfolds. That will be the budget. It will be how the cabinet is reshuffled. Is it investor friendly or not? And then finally, we'll have the credit rating agencies back in June, and they'll be telling us whether we're making much progress or not with all the decisions we are now taking.
Professor, I thank you so much for your time joining us to discuss this and other factors, of course, relating to the economy. We were joined by the Northwest University School of Business and Governance, the SBG. He is Professor Raymond Parsons in our weekly slot. It's called The Economy.
Yeah, obviously, of course, we've been running quite a bit of stuff with you guys, asking you on a poll what, well, are we being held to ransom? And also, of course, our question of the day has been, well, what were your expectations met? Were your expectations met? Let's just have a look at some of those tweets quick. This is where we stand at the moment. We're on 243 votes. Is Parliament being held to ransom? 52%, slight majority say yes, we are being held ransom. Of course, that was the Brexit vote, 52 to 48. Boy Chawarelo Dutton says, Newsroom, he should lessen regulatory burden on small-scale miners. Yeah, that's a discussion that's ongoing at the moment. IG says, maybe yes, because he touched on the data must fall issue. Nacho said, we've heard more promises for the last 1,000 years. In that speech, I missed resolutions, action plan, and accountability. Monique Sneyman says, the president didn't address the nuclear issue. Why not, she asks. Well, we'll be back at the top of the hour, a couple of minutes with all the top stories. We'll also have a crossing to Pretoria to look at the build-up, of course, to today's big event, which is, of course, the memorial service of Joost van der Westhuizen. See you shortly.
Of South Africa's celebrities were battling it out for 40 grand at the 5th annual Celebrity Cook-Off in Witbank.
We look forward to welcoming everybody to Emlahleni because this is the place of coal.
For a starter, I'll give you guys 45 minutes to prepare, and the main course will be 1 hour 30 minutes.
The team name is Inequa Stars, the clever choices.
Yes! Manora Pizza.
3 Michelin stars.
Yes!
Like this. 2. Drum roll. Swami and the defending champions are the Michelin stars.
That's Trends Travel every Sunday, 12 to 1 p.m. on SABC News.
Welcome back. It's been an interesting start to our show today. Of course, President Jacob Zuma responding to questions after SONA last night. Yes, once again, we saw the security situation in Parliament at times a little bit tenuous, if one can be polite about it. Kendall Machalat is with me. Kendall,
yep.
You'll be talking to Simon shortly about Joost van der Westhuizen is being laid to rest today.
It's the other big story of the day. A lot of people are looking forward to being at the memorial service, as well as also what it is we've got available for them to see on TV.
We'll be going there shortly, but let's just do the housekeeping. Let's have a look at, of course, we ask you the question. The question that we've asked you on screen is this one. Has the president during the SONA 2017 speech met your expectations? Yesterday we saw on this program lots of questions asked. People wanted jobs. People wanted to know about many other things. Let's have a look at what you guys are tweeting us. Siafana says, yes, it met my expectations because he spoke about water and sanitation.
Then our social media manager weighs in with far from it. It's just a repetition of the same sentiments over and over again with no action.
This one from Boycho Warelo Dutton. He says he should lessen the regulatory burden on small-scale miners. Of course, we know the Zama Zama issue is being addressed.
100%. Michael comes in with SONA 2017, not yet, because I was expecting fees must fall issue to be solved once and for all.
Yeah, there's a commission dealing with that. IG comes out, he says, maybe yes, because he touched on the data must fall issue. Yes, bread and butter issues. That's what people want to know. Of course, we're running a poll after the chaos we saw in Parliament. Fists flying again. Some say unparliamentary behavior. So we ask you, is Parliament being held to ransom? Lots of votes in today, 248 votes, passionately voting. Keep voting, guys. We're sitting at 51%. A slight majority saying, yes, Parliament is being held to ransom, Kendall.
And 49% say no. It's too close to call, really, because it seems like it's going to be doing this shift over the course of the morning. Very interesting to see what our viewers have to say about that when they actually do comment on it.
Yeah, there's lots of news ahead of us, so let's get straight into it with our top stories. The DA is expected to challenge the deployment of the SANDF and police to Parliament during the State of the Nation address in court today. South African rugby legend Joost van der Westhuizen will be remembered in a public memorial service at Loftus Versfeld in Pretoria later today. US President Donald Trump has promised a legal battle after a federal appeals court refused to restore his controversial executive order on immigration. That's our top stories at this hour. Let's go over to Kendall now to bring us into the loop. What is happening in Pretoria?
100%. You've been a massive day for a lot of people, a lot of rugby fans, as well as just ordinary South Africans, where iconic ball scrum off and Springbok World Cup winner US van der Westhuizen will be laid to rest today. This after a public memorial service at his beloved Loftus Versfeld Stadium. Our reporter Simon Burke is at Loftus covering this. Now, Simon, good morning to you. Thanks very much for actually coming through to us, because this is a big day. Have a lot of people started arriving yet?
Well, it's a very big and subdued day here at Loftus Versfeld. The people haven't really come in just yet. Of course, the family is holding a private ceremony right now as we speak. The memorial service for the public expected to get off and running at 12:30. But you can sense in Pretoria that it is a subdued day. Flags at half-mast, and right here at his beloved Loftus, as you say, everybody is getting ready to send off a hero, certainly for Pretoria and also for the Springboks.
Simon, I will be chatting to you again later on at 10:40. But for now, one of the things that I've picked up on social media, there's been a massive call for people to either wear their Bulls jerseys, their blue Bulls jerseys, or their Springbok jerseys. Have you seen any of these on your way through to the stadium as you were going through Pretoria?
Absolutely. Wearing your jersey today would not be out of place. Of course, I'm wearing black, but that's just because of me. But yeah, I think the general public and rugby supporters at large have all heeded the call to come out and wear their colours, wear the green and gold, wear the light blue of the Blue Bulls, and indeed any other provincial jersey, because Joost was so part of the fabric of South African rugby, and he was a hero to all. Of course, when you wear the green and gold jersey, you do become an icon for everybody. And what he did in the jersey justifies why people are going to come out today in the colours.
Simon, thank you very much. Once again, I will be coming back to you again at about 10:40 when we bring you a more in-depth crossing and more in-depth information from Simon Burke out at Loftus Versfeld. And this is what else is coming up in the world of sports today.
Terrific piece of ball striking that.
Now, intent on a serious whitewashed approaches will not be taking their foot off the pedal when they play Sri Lanka in the 5th and final ODI this afternoon in Centurion. And the Olympic legacy in Brazil is but a pipe dream. It's just 6 months after Rio hosted the Olympics. Game venues sit idle and already in disrepair. All this and more later on in the Sports Bulletin. But for now, it is back to Eben, who's got the news.
Yeah, Kendall, thank you very much. Very good morning to you if you've just joined us. Let's go to our top story. President Jacob Zuma's State of the Nation address was delayed by over an hour last night amid chaotic scenes in Parliament. Countless points of order brought mainly by the EFF delayed proceedings. Parliamentary Speaker Balekambete eventually summoned the guards to eject the EFF, and most of the rest of the opposition then walked out. When his speech got underway, President Zuma promised radical economic transformation.
Let us unite in driving radical economic transformation for the good of our country.
It was no secret that President Zuma's State of the Nation address would dwell on the economy. 22 years later, ownership patterns remain largely in favor of the minority, and the majority is still struggling to make ends meet. And his government is tackling the situation head-on.
There can be no sustainability in any economy if the majority is excluded in this manner. In my discussions with the business community, they accepted these transformation imperatives.
And big construction companies who normally get fingered for collusion will be compelled to subcontract small black companies. And legislation to unlock economic potential is being brought in.
As a start, the new regulations making it compulsory for big constructors to subcontract 30% of business to black-owned enterprises have been finalized and were gazetted on the 20th of January.
As the information plays an important role in today's livelihoods, the president hinted at lowering data costs.
We assured the youth that the lowering of the cost of data is uppermost in our policies and plans.
The process to expedite land reform was also high on the speech, but he's referred the bill on expropriation of land back to Parliament. There are concerns on inadequate public participation.
I have now decided to refer the bill back to Parliament for reconsideration on the basis that the bill might not pass constitutional muster.
The president has also emphasized his administration's resolve to address student funding challenges. Last year saw mass protests over funding of higher education.
As soon as the broadest sections of our society agree on what to do, our government will take steps to prioritize resources to implement it on a phased basis.
The crime was also highlighted. The president also announced that Mpumalanga province will also get its own high court. Last year, Limpopo province had its own high court officially opened.
The coming into operation of these two high courts means that we have now realized the goal of high court in every province of the country.
The president may have hit the right notes on key issues aimed at transforming the country's economy, but many will be watching whether the words are matched by actions. Mzwandile Mbethe, SABC News, Parliament.
Yeah, before that, it proved to be another day of drama, disruption, and even fisticuffs at this year's State of the Nation address. The rolling battles between the EFF and the president once again delayed Sona by more than an hour before proceedings finally got underway.
The battle lines were drawn from the word go, with the EFF mocking the president. The ANC benches retaliated, shouting the name of the party. And just before the president stood up, a point of order was called, charging Parliament was acting illegally.
21 members of the SAPS have joined the Parliamentary Protection Services today with the intention of arresting members of the EFF. They even have these cable ties.
And before long, a request for a moment of silence for the deaths of 94 psychiatric patients in Gauteng.
I would like, as this is the first sitting of this House since the tragedy of Edemeni, of the Edemeni 94, who we recognize today as the greatest human tragedy in this country since Marikana.
The ANC countered the calls for the president not to address the House.
This parliament has decided not to remove the president on the basis of what the honorable member is raising today. We can't go back to that motion that has not been properly put before this House. It was put before this House. The motion was defeated in this House.
As presiding officers tried to calm the situation, they pleaded for the business of the day to go uninterrupted.
I have ruled on this matter. Please allow us to continue with the business of the day. I want to urge honorable members not to stand up and repeat what is really not a point of order.
But the opposition put on more pressure.
The gentleman before you has broken his oath of office. He admitted that. Subsequently, the court found that he has discharged himself from the oath of office.
And the situation appeared to get out of hand at this stage.
We believe that in actual fact, the freedom of expression of the members of this honorable House is definitely being abused by yourselves.
A call for proceedings to continue.
The leader of the ANC who is here has violated the Constitution. What doesn't change is the fact that South Africans voted for him. We are not here tonight to debate that question. What we are here tonight to debate is the people of South Africa and the fact that many don't have work. Can I request and prevail that we proceed on this matter so that we can talk about the people's business?
As to the presence of these members who we think are members of the security forces, and you make a ruling on that.
Honorable Kwankwa.
And not even a call from the elders helped.
Sindozi suggested that I should leave here because he says it's going to be quite rough. I don't know where to go.
At this stage, the president had left the House. After more than an hour of stop and starts by the president, the speaker drew the line.
We have no option.
He must address the nation from prison, not from there.
The parliamentary protection services
by
to come and assist you or persuade you to leave the House.
Other opposition parties followed suit and left the House. Ulelani Philip, SABC News, Parliament.
There were mixed reactions to the President's State of the Nation address by different political parties.
If you saw our pamphlet for the People's Assembly, where we listed 12 key tasks, all of them are covered by that State of the Nation address. It means the process from the January 8th to the Lekgotla of the ANC, to the Lekgotla of Cabinet, to the State of the Nation is a seamless process. And therefore, I'm quite happy details in economy, because the biggest problem facing South Africa is low growth of the economy, unemployment, poverty. And therefore, the focus on the economy was not an accident and a detailed attempt to talk about what we mean by radical economic transformation. We've been talking about it as a slogan. We get into details, and the SONA did exactly the same.
He didn't actually say something new, what he didn't say before. For instance, he referred to the radical socio-economic transformation, and then he actually said what the ANC already decided with the Lekgotla. He said, for instance, on the land issue, that they will speed up the transfer of title deeds to owners. So we want to see whether that is going to happen. He said that he's going to use the expropriation bill to enhance land reform. The fact of the matter is that the expropriation bill is going to be challenged in the Constitutional Court. It has already been said because people think that it is unconstitutional.
I think the president actually touched the right buttons. But frankly, I didn't expect that one was going to get many surprises because of the state of the country, the state of the economy, and so on. But I think as a statement of intent, I don't think that one can fault him about the vision, about the future, and especially the key thing that he talked about was the issue of the land, because land is the most tangible form of investment. And when he mentioned that issue, particularly the fact that people must accept land rather than money, was to me resonates well with me. Except that I'm very worried because there are many people who have been given land of our people, but actually where the land goes down because they don't use it properly.
He repeated most of some of the things he said last year, so there wasn't really anything new. But we must, for an example, he spoke about the one-stop shop Invest SA that he mentioned last year. And he said, for instance, last year that they were going to make sure that they establish it, but the first branch is only going to be open this year. The other issue is that, remember, on the issue of radical economic transformation, the president said that in 2014 for the first time. He's still saying exactly the same thing. And you look at the transformation of the economy, there's nothing radical about it. It's still the toy-toys route and approach that the ANC has taken so far. But I think we welcome initiatives such as, for an example, if you look at saying that BRICS would have its own rating agency, that announcement is very good. The other issue which I think is important and that we must commend the president for is the issue around fighting cartels and collusion in specific sectors in our economy in trying to transform the economy of South Africa.
Some reacted angrily after the mayhem that proceeded in the National Assembly and vowed to continue their battles.
The scuffles between EFF MPs and the PPS began inside the National Assembly. By the time they got outside, it had escalated to a full-blown fight. Several MPs suffered minor injuries. At this stage, there have been reports of only one serious injury. With the semblance of calm eventually restored, the EFF, which has now been thrown out of its third consecutive State of the Nation address, vowed to take their fight against President Jacob Zuma and the ruling ANC to the grave, if need be.
We are prepared to leave this parliament, being in a coffin, standing for the truth. We are not going to be intimidated by soldiers, by police, by criminals who are hell-bent at defending a constitutional delinquent.
The DA walked out of the House shortly after the EFF's removal. It too promised to fight the ANC, but it will do it through the courts.
Out! It could not be right for us to stay in that parliament and justify the actions of an ANC government who are clearly committed to corruption, clearly committed to violating the constitution. I will be in court tomorrow to put a review application against the actions of this parliament for allowing a violation of the constitution.
Smaller opposition parties also expressed their outrage at the violence that's now becoming an all too familiar part of the State of the Nation address.
This is no longer the ANC that taught us what we know, that taught us to respect our people, to love them, to sacrifice for them. This is the ANC that is for feeding themselves.
I feel ashamed that our parliament has degenerated into this state of chaos. And it's quite clear it will not stop, it will not go away until Mr. Zuma leaves office.
Lukhanyo Khalada, SABC News, Parliament.
During the TNA Business Breakfast media briefing this morning, President Jacob Zuma was asked about the Judicial Commission of Inquiry into the allegations of state capture, which was recommended by former Public Protector Thuli Madonsela.
Well, you would, in a sense, push me to debate that issue, which I wouldn't want to, partly because, as you know, quite a number of us have some concern in the manner in which that issue was handled. It's therefore difficult to come in and air some views on the matter. Certainly, if the state capture is a problem, it has to be dealt with holistically. If we have a judicial commission of inquiry, it has to deal with the matters because, as you know, there are people who complained to the former public protector, but there are people also who have complained openly, and some have complained to me about other people who own some big companies. So it's not the matter you could do in the manner in which, in my view, was done. Hurriedly, I had an experience with the public protector who did not initially indicate that he was investigating me, who was just reporting to me to say, look, I've got this, I'm doing, and later wanted a meeting to brief me. The meeting changed into now questioning when she was left with few days. So the matter was not rather handled very neatly. So it's a matter that I would not want to go into that much really.
Well, let's shift our focus now to some of the day's other news. A public memorial service will be held for South African rugby legend Joost van der Westhuizen at Loftus Versfeld in Pretoria today, and it will start at 12:30 and it will be broadcast live on the SABC's channel 404. That's this one on DSTV. Speakers will feature during the service include Sports Minister Bigile Mbalula, 1995 Rugby World Cup winning captain Francois Pienaar, and World Rugby Chairman Bill Beaumont. Musician PJ Powers and other performers will be part of the program. The 1995 Rugby World Cup winning team will also be in attendance at the memorial service. A private funeral service will be held later the same day. Moving abroad, United States President Donald Trump has promised a legal battle after a federal appeals court refused to restore his controversial executive order on immigration. A defiant Trump quickly pledged to battle on, tweeting within minutes of the decision, "See you in court. The security of our nation is at stake," is what he tweeted. The Justice Department had asked the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals to restore the measure on an emergency basis, but the three-judge panel instead maintained the suspension ordered by a federal judge in the state of Seattle. Trump's decree summarily denied entry to all refugees for 120 days, as well as travelers from Iran, Iraq, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, Syria and the Yemen for 90 days. Refugees from Syria were blocked indefinitely. Now the case could end up in the country's Supreme Court. We're going to take a short commercial break. Newsroom will be back with you right after this.
The Richards Bay Industrial Development Zone is a purpose-built industrial estate that leverages investment in export-orientated manufacturing industries. Our vision is to be the preferred special economic zone for quality investments whilst delivering value to our stakeholders, and our mission is to utilize the competitive advantage of the Richards Bay area to attract sustainable investments that stimulate economic growth, job creation, beneficiation of resources and the empowerment of people.
Welcome back. Very good morning to you if you've just joined us here on the Newsroom show. It's just gone, well, shortly before 10:30. And last night, President Jacob Zuma made bold announcements on radical economic transformation. In his State of the Nation address, he said that government has reprioritized 32 billion rand to ensure that deserving students can study without fearing that past debts will prevent them from finishing their studies. But how does that affect our basic education system? Now, to discuss this, we are joined by Noncedo Madube-Dube, who's the Western Cape's Deputy Head at Equal Education. Very good morning to you, and thank you for being with us.
Thank you very much for having us.
In the whole, what is your overall impression of the President's speech last night?
Listen, I'll tell you this. I don't think as a movement that we're very impressed with the mention of education or the talk on education and SONA.
Yeah.
And this is because even from the past 3 years, there wasn't any deliberate or concerned effort to try and address any real issues within the basic education sector. I mean, there was a short stint about education and youth in general within the speech, but showing no real remorse to the fact that the education system is in crisis in the country.
Do you think that the fees must fall movement has overshadowed education and in some sort of way shifted the focus away from the needs at a basic education level?
I wouldn't say that at all, actually. The interesting part, so equal education is a youth mass movement, membership-based, and a lot of the issues that we've been talking about, discussing and fighting for in the country in the past 8 to 9 years as a movement have been the things that have come up when we speak or we listened to issues of the fees must fall and the roads must fall, comrades. Not necessarily overshadowed, but more highlighted these issues. And the nice thing about fees must fall and those roads must fall, any other high institution learning movements, is actually that it gives a sharper or magnified glance at what the actual problem is. Meaning that these issues don't necessarily start in varsity, and everyone knows this, that these issues start at primary level, and even before primary level, at ECD level. If the president had spent time, or took time out of his speech to talk about a needed concentration, or deliberate support, or intervention programs into ECD level, and then he would have begun to start talking about the real issues with education.
Just recap for us, what are the things that you think need to be addressed at basic education level with urgency this year?
As I just mentioned, ECD is an important place to start. The Human Resources Research Council, Human Sciences Research Council had found that over 67% of grade 3 learners can't do basic mathematics. And this means that even at basic education level, foundation phase, these things aren't being dealt with in that space. And this is typically something that affects poor Black communities. And there's a ripple effect to this kind of thing. Obviously, if learners can't go or finish primary school correctly and then go into high school, and the funny thing is that it's only February, and just in January, we were having a hoo-ha as a nation over education because of the matric results. But those things aren't even a proper indicator of the real problem within the education system. Yes, the results are said to increase minimally, but the real effect of those things is that there's a degenerated decrease because a lot of people are dropping out of school because they're being failed by the basic education system in the country. So if we were to concentrate on those things, supporting people, I don't think plunging in money into the education pot is a good enough recourse or plan to salvage the system, but rather looking at things internally, administratively. The NCOP, for example, could start looking at ways to support and look into things like the Section 100, where it says, listen, as the national government will take over some operations of provincial to alleviate things that you can't do as a provincial government. But there's such a mismatch between the ways national and provincial governments work, and I think that's part of the reason, the administrative reason within the education system. And those are the things that we need to start looking at. How do we make sure that money that's been put in isn't underspent, first of all, on things like giving quality infrastructure to schools, so that you're able to start looking at giving children in Nikhailicha and children in the suburbs a semi-equal opportunity at learning in a good conducive space to learn and therefore acquire skills.
You talk about urban education in a way, is what I'm hearing. What about rural children? They're prejudiced with a shortage of funds. Surely this radical economic transformation must deal with things like mud schools and the prejudices that rural children face every day.
It's unfortunate that some things within the SONA, and having looked at the 2016 and the 2014 feel like lip service. And that's why I kept mentioning things like concerned and deliberate like action towards basic education, because schools in rural areas really have absolutely no agency and no voice. So even though in urban areas we can, excuse me, you can see the problems, and we can organize and mobilize against these things and try knock on some doors. But in the rural spaces, it's even worse. There's no infrastructure, there's no support, and if the department were to start hiring or upskilling its personnel to have people like project managers and quantitative surveyors, part and parcel, CSO actually would play an incredible role in assisting this space. So different stakeholders within education were able to come together and find ways to be able to reach into the most vulnerable spaces or parts of our country to try and create a good balance and upskill people, to create a good labor force, which then will contribute to the radical socioeconomical transformation system or route that the president speaks of.
That process that you're talking about, where does it start in 2017?
Say that again, sorry.
Where does it start in 2017 now? Where does it start?
The process of trying to do these things. It'd be interesting to find out what the budget speech is going to say. When I look at things like, for instance, Equal Education has a campaign that we've been working on for a number of years now, called the Norms and Standards. So if to look at things like infrastructure, it's Norms and Standards for school infrastructure, looking at things like the ASIDI grant, if that grant, because it's been recorded now that normally it's been underspending by over 800 million rand. So if something like that could get a sharper focus on, and be used in a better way. Because, for instance, when it started in 2011, it had 510 schools put on the list as emergency schools that needed to be eradicated of inappropriate structures. A lot of schools were recorded not having water supply or electricity, and those things make it difficult for anyone to learn and teach. So if you look at things like the city grant and the building of schools, where only 37% of schools projected to being built, and this is an overestimation, of course, have actually been built. So first, but I mean, and there's an upside as well to this thing in that since the norms and standards have been published 3 years ago, is that there's been, from year to year, a general increase in the number of schools being built. But we need to focus on that, building schools and upskilling departments. So the administrative part in general, even if it's at like, it should start at lower level and work its way upwards.
One issue that I want you to wrap up on quickly is that basic education dropout rates are unacceptable. How do we overcome that?
How do we overcome? That's exactly what I was speaking to, though. If we're to look at basic education at a very primary level, from ECD, for example, early childhood development, it's easier to get a better retention rate because people are finding that it's okay to be in school. I'm not going to start speaking on things of curriculum and the quality of pedagogy because those things are secondary to finding the basic resources to be able to call your school a school and able to feel like as much as being invested in you as a South African citizen as it is in someone that is in a white suburban school, previously white at that.
Noncedo, thank you for joining us today on the Newsroom show. That's Noncedo Madube-Dube. She is the Western Cape Deputy Head at Equal Education. Of course, we're talking about the plight of early childhood learners, basic education. Now, of course, we've been asking you a question with regards to last night. Your expectations, Sona. The President delivered his address. Has he met your expectations? Let's have a look at what you guys are telling us with regards to this. Michael Mditra says yes, but not forgetting that it's just a formality, says Michael. Khomotse Sekhoni says, the President touched on all important issues, but I did not hear any form of action plan. Just a speech. No how, when, just. There's a 12-point action plan, Khomotso. Maybe you should Google it. This one from Siafana. He says, yebo, yes, because he spoke about water and sanitation. Yes, people want to hear things that affect their lives. Social media manager comes back and says, far from it. It's just a repetition of the same sentiments over and over again with no action. Of course, we've also asked, well, we're also running a poll today. Today we've been running a poll after the chaos that we saw in Parliament again last night, and you guys have been voting on the poll, and let's have a look at where we stand. Of course, we're asking you the question on the poll. That question relates to the chaos. Is Parliament being held to ransom? That's what we ask you. 50% say yes, 50% say no on 262 votes. Interesting one, that. Parliament being held to ransom. Some say no, some say yes. Kind of split in South Africa about that kind of behavior in Parliament, it says. Well, we're going to take a short commercial break. Of course, a little bit later, an hour and a half's time, we'll be going to the memorial service of US Van der West days. And after a short break, we'll get an update from there with Simon Burke and Kendall Mahamati. Don't go away.
A top 5 rated horse racing event in the world, fashion is a highlight for those in attendance. All decked out in blue and white, the Lomorians Queen Plate is the premier event that kicked off everyone's social calendar.
That it was all part of my master plan to cast John Legend, but deprive him of his normal instrument and give that one to Ryan.
The House of Truth is not just a name. It is a religion. It is a lifestyle. It is a conviction that drives us.
What really excites me is how people have kept it very simple and also played with the theme, and how each person has interpreted it in their own way.
To stay updated with all the current entertainment news, tune into Trends every Saturday from 12 to 1.
Typhoid outbreak that broke out in Zimbabwe's capital late last year has claimed the life of a 13-year-old girl in Harare's township of Mbare.
Most residents have put the blame on the Zimbabwean government for the debilitating economic situation.
There is no interest in the affairs of the city and the town, and really we have to do something about it.
One expert believes the Barclays Absa apartheid funding saga reeks of political factionalism. Yanni Rousseau
says things are not as they seem.
And the money, well, that was whisked out of the country.
Absa paid full value for the assistance. So from that perspective, I cannot see how it can be made out that Absa benefited.
Good morning, I'm Kendall Makamate, and it's a big morning that we've got in the world of sports. So today, we've got that iconic Bull Scrum off and Springbok World Cup winner, US Van der West, who's going to be laid to rest a little later today. Now, this is after this public memorial service that Simon Burke introduced to us a little earlier this morning at his beloved Loftus Versfeld Stadium. He mentioned a little earlier that people were yet to arrive, but definitely that the mood is somber and they're expecting quite a lot of people to come through to Loftus to say goodbye to US Van der West. He's out there at Loftus waiting for us to see what it is we've got to ask of him. Simon, thanks very much for coming back to us. And one of the things that that was key when I was thinking about this morning is how many of the rugby world players are going to be present at this function today. Do you know?
Yeah, no, absolutely. The entire 1995 World Cup squad, all those guys that can get to this memorial service. And it's going to be quite an emotional and solemn occasion when they take the casket from the tunnel entrance onto the ground, onto his Loftus Versfeld pitch, and take it to where the memorial service will be taking place. They'll be accompanying the casket, and I don't think you can get more of a poignant moment if you try. And that's what's going to happen. Francois Pienaar's going to be here. Joel Stransky's going to be here. All the heroes from the 1995 World Cup. And indeed, yes, they've been speaking a lot about Joost in the past couple of days. And this will be the moment for them to also be present, therefore supporting the family and the friends and also the rugby community at large, because Joost was so much part of South African rugby.
One of the things that have come out, which a lot of people are either being told of for the first time or being reminded of, is how Joost van der Westhuizen really changed the way that rugby is being played. That he changed the way the number 9, the scrum half, how he operates behind the pack and ahead of the back line. Can you tell us a little bit more about what's being said and what you think about that, Simon?
Well, I've heard from the two big rivals of the time, and it was George Gregan and Justin Marshall, about what they thought of Joost van der Westhuizen, and obviously George Gregan for Australia and Justin Marshall for New Zealand. And the fact that Joost was their opponent meant they had to think ever so hard about how they were going to combat the Springboks and Joost in particular, because they just couldn't get a read on him. And that's what he did for the game. He wasn't an instinctive player, and yes, he changed the number 9 position and the possibilities around it, but it wasn't really a kind of thing that you can now insert in a textbook and teach to future scrum halves. He was an instinctive player, and he read the game incredibly well. And the highest praise that he could get as a player was to have the fact that New Zealand and Australia, the two big rivals of now and of that time, to be second-guessing themselves into how they're going to play against Joost van der Westhuizen. And then even if you go further up to the Northern Hemisphere, you'd have team meetings with the English when they would play the South Africans. And the first name on their chalkboard when they were discussing what to do with the Springboks would be what to do with Joost van der Westhuizen in effect. He was incredibly, incredibly good at what he did, and the read of the game and how he could attack. And the fact that he had 38 international tries speaks for itself. It's unheard of. A scrum half shouldn't have those kind of numbers.
Yeah, his strike rate was absolutely phenomenal after only 93 tests. You know, one of the things you mentioned, George Gregan, you know, we also had tweets coming out during the course of the week where the Tim Horans of the world, where we had different rugby clubs, where Dan Carter himself coming out and actually giving their condolences and talking about Joost in glowing terms. Friend and foe alike, like you said, really respected his prowess on the field, both mental and physical prowess.
Absolutely, and that's just the measure of what the man did for the sport. That all the greats of the game, all the World Rugby Hall of Famers, the Brian O'Driscolls, the Dan Carters, Jonah Lomu, everybody, they all held Joost in the highest of high regard. They all feared the Springboks, definitely, and the Springboks will always, to this day, be one of the most feared side in international rugby. But during that time, it was Joost van der Westhuizen that they feared the most, because they knew he was the guy who could do the damage. He was the one who could hit them when they were anticipating a heavy forward ruck hitting them front on. Joost could change tactic and then just slice through the defense. And that would be a highlight reel for years to come. Yeah. And as we've seen with the footage of Joost van der Westhuizen, this is the kind of plays that will stand the test of time and will continually be rolled out to prospective backline players to show them this is how you do it. That's how Joost did it.
Yeah, Simon, you mentioned a little earlier Jonah Lomu. He's another foreign legend, and we all know how close he and Joost became. We've seen footage of the two of them hanging out, both not in the best of health, but we've seen them being with each other, and you can definitely see the mutual respect between Jonah Lomu, who's also passed, as well as Joost van der Westhuizen when he was still alive with us. Simon, of the world's press, who is there yet? Because I can imagine we've got everybody from all of the rugby playing countries from around the world who's at Loftus.
No, absolutely, we got everybody. It's a full house today in terms of the media, all the local media, all the wire services, all the guys with bureaus here. They've all made the trip up from Johannesburg, or perhaps they were based in Pretoria. But the media attention is definitely there. Everybody wants to say goodbye to Joost and wants to be a part of the memorial service for Joost van der Westhuizen. And we're anticipating a massive crowd here at Loftus Versfeld, bedecked in green and gold, and also the light blue of the Bulls.
All right, cool. Simon, exactly what time does the memorial service start? I believe it's at just after midday.
Yeah, it's destined to start at 12:30, and that's when we're going to get things underway, and it's going to run until about 3:30, and it's going to be quite an emotional time here at the Loftus Versfeld Stadium, right down to even PJ Powers singing that World Cup anthem, World in Union. I think there's not going to be a dry eye in the stadium when that happens. But also the 1995 Springboks will be at hand. Also, all other Springboks, the greats from Pretoria, Victor Matfield will be here. They'll all be front and center. Unfortunately, the Bulls can't be here, their first choice players. They're in Brisbane at the moment. They just defeated the Chiefs in a warm-up match, but they've all been sending their condolences as well. But life goes on in Pretoria, and the Bulls, they have a Super Rugby season to start with. And I dare say that when that Super Rugby season starts, there is going to be a lot of remembrance still for Joost when they play their first match at Loftus Versfeld.
I'm sure they will be playing with lots of yes, as the Bulls would most likely be saying. Simon Burke, thank you so much. We'll be chatting to you again very shortly. Thanks for that, Simon. You have Simon Burke out at Loftus Versfeld giving us exactly what's going on out at Loftus. Now, I know that you've also been giving us your comments on your thoughts, and you also want to share with the rest of our viewers what you think. Batman, for example, is saying honouring and remembering Joost today by not wearing a South African jersey, but a Blue Bulls jersey. He wore green, his blood was blue. Karine van der Merwe, good morning. I'm wearing my Springbok shirt together with everyone else in honour of Joost. Rest in peace, Joost. Rulani Kubai, so I saw this sad documentary about the life of Joost. Number 9 sure did play his last game well. Definitely far better than all his rugby conquests. Nikita Swanepoel comes in with a rest in peace, Joost. Wearing my green and gold today in remembrance of an amazing, one-of-a-kind athlete. You made us all proud. Joost, may your soul rest in peace. And there you have it. Fans wearing the green and gold. There you have it, more fans wearing the green and gold. Goosebump material, this. That's what Joost van der Westhuizen means to a lot of South Africans of all races, across all different divides. Joost van der Westhuizen was one of those who took part in a team that united us all, and he's being celebrated today. Now, moving on to other national sports, the South African cricket team will not rest on its laurels in the 5th and final one-day international against Sri Lanka at SuperSport Park in Centurion today. This despite a 4-0 lead. While the selectors and coaches will use the match to look at some players ahead of this year's ICC Champions Trophy, a win will also see the Proteas claim their #1 spot on the International Cricket Council's ODI rankings.
Coaches usually rest key players and don't push their teams to go all out in dead rubbers to avoid injuries and possible burnout. And with the ICC Champions Trophy taking place in England and Wales in June, injuries to key players is something the Proteas don't want. But with the #1 spot in the world beckoning, the team will go all out for a win against Sri Lanka.
You want to go into a big tournament being #1 in the world, so we're always talking about it. We always had a vision to be #1 when we get to a big tournament. I think we are on path with it if we win this game, and there's a good possibility that we're going to be one.
Sri Lanka did well with bat in hand in the last 2 ODIs, with wickets hard to come by for the Proteas. It is something the team will be looking to improve as it prepares for the Champions Trophy.
I think we're still at the stage where we're finding who's going to be the opening pair with KG. I think it was a good contest. We got tested, and we've had easy sailing the last couple of games. So Cape Town game for us was an eye-opener because they started well, and I think the last 3 games they really started well. Tikwela has been a thorn in our side, but that's the type of test we want from these games, because when we get to New Zealand, it's going to be a bigger test.
Langeveld says they will reduce the workload of the bowlers and rotate them with the ICC Champions Trophy in mind. Pesing Katlo, SABC News, Centurion.
Now, less than 6 months after Rio de Janeiro hosted the first ever Olympics in South America, game venues sit idle and already in disrepair, raising questions about a legacy that organizers promised would benefit the Brazilian city and its residents. A lack of activity and upkeep is plaguing facilities, including the site of swimming competitions, where craters from disassembled pools collect stagnant water, and Rio's famed Maracanã Stadium cited the opening and closing ceremonies. Before the Games, organizers touted the venues as facilities that could easily be repurposed in sports-crazed Rio. Now officials acknowledge the delays and blame a series of factors for the failure to repurpose the venues, from Brazil's continuing recession to disagreements with contractors and a change in mayors after elections in October. Federal, state and local governments, along with private partners, paid more than 40 billion reais, that's $12.8 billion, to host the Olympics, about 7 billion of which was for game venues and related facilities. Now they're negotiating with each other and new partners to find ways to fulfill the expected Olympic legacy. And that's where we leave it. We'll be back shortly. Remember, Simon Broke will begin bringing us an update on what's happening out at Loftus Festival. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, you'll still be watching Newsroom.
Gift of the Giver says it wants to resolve the issue diplomatically and amicably so. It still believes it could be a case of mistaken identity.
OPEC members Nigeria and Libya, both suffering setbacks in production, were given exemption.
In 2016, the airline was voted the leading airline in Africa by passengers in the World Travel Awards. Currently transports more than 160 tons of cargo.
She won the Sun International Ladies Challenge, the Supersport Ladies Challenge and the 2016 chase to the Investor Cup for Ladies Final.
Stay tuned to News Today, Monday to Friday from 3 to 5:30 p.m. here on SABC News.
Typhoid outbreak that broke out in Zimbabwe's capital late last year has claimed the life of a 13-year-old girl in Harare's township of Mbare.
Most residents have put the blame on the Zimbabwean government for the debilitating economic situation.
There is no interest in the affairs of the city and the town, and really we have to do something about it.
One expert believes the Barclays Absa apartheid funding saga reeks of political factionalism. Yanni Rousseau
says things are not as they seem.
And the money, well, that was whisked out of the country.
Absa paid full value for the assistance. So from that perspective, I cannot see how it can be made out that Absa benefited.
this Ford Cougar thing is becoming a hot potato for them, excuse the pun.
U.S. car maker Ford has finally admitted that a fault is causing some of its Ford Cougar SUVs to catch fire, and
it also formally issued a recall in South Africa.
Ford needs to take accountability.
We'll work with our dealers and try to come up with a way that satisfies them.
Yes, there we are. It's 11 o'clock. It's the final hour here on the Newsroom, Jumbo Africa. I'm Elvis Preslin.
Kendo Makamate.
We'll be with you until 12 o'clock. Now, today we focus on the security situation in Parliament during President Jacob Zuma's State of the Nation address last night that sent alarm bells for democracy in South Africa. So the question that we ask you today, is Parliament being held ransom? That's the question to you. And of course, if you look at that question that you have on your screen, you'll see there that we asked the question, has the President Sona 2017 speech met your expectations? That's the question. In fact, that's on the poll. So I've got a little bit mixed up there, but let's take a look at your tweets.
Yeah, I think our viewers don't though. I'm sure they're sending us exactly what it is we're asking them, Elvis.
This one from Dutton says he should lessen the regulatory burden on small-scale miners.
Michael Jambas says, Sonnet 2017, not yet, because I was expecting fees must fall issue to be resolved once and for all.
EG says maybe yes, because he touched on the data must fall issue, and you can see EG there on his cell phone, so he's using a lot of data, EG, so data must fall.
Ayetanazo says we've heard more promises to last for 1,000 years in that speech. I miss resolutions, action plan, and accountability.
Well, there you have it. Those are some of your comments. Let's take a look at the poll that we're running. Kendall, is Parliament being held to ransom? And what you've got to say to us is there's 269 votes. Now, before, when we had it up, it was 50-50.
100%. However, it did change in the next hour, Elvis, but it's holding steady.
Yeah.
51% saying yes, Parliament is being held to ransom, and 49% saying no.
Well, there you have it. You can keep them coming. We'll read your tweets in relation to the question on the poll as well. So keep them coming on the Twitter handle as well as on the Facebook page. But right now, let's get down to business. Take a look at your top news stories. President Jacob Zuma says what happened in Parliament yesterday is not a reflection of what's happening in the country. South African rugby legend Joos van der Westhuizen will be remembered in a public memorial service at Loftus Versfeld in Pretoria today. And United States President Donald Trump has promised a legal battle after a federal appeals court refused to restore his controversial executive order on migration. He said there, I'll see you in court. Those are all your headlines. Before we get to the news, let's find out from Kendall Makamate what's happening on the sports front.
Elvis, thank you very much. Massive day after Loftus Versfeld in Pretoria, as Simon Burke said. In fact, you know what? I get ahead of myself. Let's hear what Simon Burke himself has to say at ball scrum off Springbok World Cup winner US van der Westhuizen's memorial service. Simon?
Yeah, Kendall, we're going to come to you live from Loftus Versfeld. Proceedings are set to get underway at 12:30. It's going to be a very emotional day already. The streets filling up with people wearing the light blue of the Blue Bulls and the green and gold of the Springboks. Of course, Joost van der Westhuizen, the man, the legend, the scrum half. He was an instrumental player for both those sides. A very emotional time. The 1995 squad will be on hand to carry his casket into the stadium from the Players' Tunnel, and we will be listening to Francois Pienaar, the likes of Joost van der Westhuizen's family, and we will also hear from PJ Powers, who will sing the World in Union song, the anthem of the Rugby World Cup. And of course, Joost van der Westhuizen won that cup in 1995.
Simon Burke, thank you very much. That's Simon Burke out at Loftus Versfeld. We will be crossing to him later on at about 11:35 for him to bring us an update of what goings on at Loftus. This is what else is coming up in sports today.
Terrific piece of ball striking that.
Intent on a serious whitewash, the Pro Chiefs will not be taking their foot off the pedal when they play Sri Lanka in the 5th and final ODI this afternoon in Centurion. And the Olympic legacy in Brazil is but a pipe dream. It's just 6 months after Rio hosted the Olympics. Game venues sit idle and are already in disrepair. All this and more later on at 11:35. For now, it is Elvis who's got the news for you.
Thank you, Kendall. Let's take a look at our top story this morning. President Jacob Zuma has described the disruptions during the State of the Nation address as unfortunate and said it
big economic drivers of the country. And if they sit like that and we do nothing, we introduce no policy, no law, we do not tackle that, we are going to remain for a long time. Now, we are saying we can't sit and think that that thing is going to happen on its own because we've got good policies. We are now saying, what can we do? If you take the mines, for an example, there are very few huge companies that deal with mines. That's where the riches of this country are. We've got to work out what are the policies that we are going to use to share it. And as a government, we have a responsibility, if we're to have the harmony, if we're to have the reconciliation, that we should close the gap, not create a situation where others are going to be poor or that we change this. No, have everybody have something. We've got to open up. We've tried to create policies like black economic empowerment, but there's a lot happening there. Those that are empowered, there are very few who have made it because the situation does not allow that. At the heart of the economy is finance. If the banks, the critical banks that dominate anything are just four, in all countries where the economy has developed, the banks are all over because it is the finances that make the country grow. But if you've got four banks, major ones, and they take everything, they don't want you to do anything. In other words, what makes the economy tick is not in your hands. No matter, you go to the banks, from the majority, they ask you, what is your collateral? What can you present? You don't have, because you have a history. And sorry, I'm told by those who do business, at times they even take your ideas and implement because they've got the money. So there's a skewed kind of economic control. We say we must be part of owning, managing, and be part of controlling the economy. In any country that we have gone into, the majority of the people must participate in these forms. And that's why the economies grow. We actually frustrate our economy deliberately by making only few people control the economy. The majority are workers, are not skilled, etc. We are doing a lot to change South Africa. Some of these things are long term, like education that we have prioritized, because we believe citizens that are empowered, are skilled, they participate in bigger numbers to grow the economy. But even education itself is a problem, because it is expensive. We are dealing with poor people who can pay education, etc. Only a few could do so. So we wanted to change this. If you have 4 banks, let us have more banks. So this is what we are saying. We can no longer say, this mine, this company was there from time immemorial, is monopolizing gold mine, and let it remain there. We are saying, how do we deal with it so that it begins to allow people to come in as we talk about black industrialists? We have said so, but for the fact that we say that, it is because they were not part of the economy. We are saying, let us unpack the economy, let us give opportunities to everyone. That's a different thing that we are going to be doing. We are saying, for an example, whatever you do, there are companies here that you find in every sector, in every level. One company, too big a monopoly. Why, when other people are in trouble, they don't have anything? That's the point we are talking about. We are saying, let us unpack, let us share, let us have systems. We must be part of everything. There mustn't be people who are controlling everything, nothing else. I mean controlling everything, whilst others are having nothing at all. People were not made by God to be workers until they die only because they're black. I think we are saying time has come that we should be able to deal with the economy at a fair level. Women must participate, the youth must participate. If you take South Africa, you take the land question. Basically, a huge percentage of the land is shared by whites. The blacks are put in what used to be called reserves. The space is getting finished there because the population is growing. So you have a situation where people, by law, were not allowed to come to the centers, and they come here and become people who put shacks and everything. That describes the state of the economy. We are now saying as government, let us think clearly, let us say this is what we want to do so that everybody participates. That is what we are saying when we talk about radical socio-economic transformation. It must be radical because we must, where we need to make the law, let us make the law. Where we need to say this must happen in this way, let us do so.
Meanwhile, President Zuma says that transformation in the mining industry is an integral component of radical economic transformation. The Mineral Resources Minister, Mosebenzi Zwane, shared how the proposed economic transformation was received by stakeholders at the mining indaba that was held in Cape Town this past week.
You'll remember that we started the indaba on Monday, and we raised these issues of transformation with the investors. We're happy that our message was received well by the investors that are coming to South Africa. We have already signed more than 5 memorandum of understanding, with the understanding that anybody that invests in South Africa should be prepared to take along the majority of South Africans who were previously disadvantaged. The mining charter that is being reviewed is to be finalized, as I've indicated, will gazette in March. It has all these elements that the Honorable President has raised. We're engaging with all sectors, including the mining chamber and other stakeholders, to understand that the role of talking has been done. The policy issues are being finalized. As you know, that the MPRDA will be finalized this year. Ours is to begin in earnest to apply what we need to apply to change the lives of the South Africans. And as the President has said, we are not going to be reckless on this matter. We understand the importance of the investors getting their money back, but we are also saying, if there has to be peace in this country, the people of South Africa, whom are part of these minerals, should also benefit. And I think that message is clear and is well received.
Now let's go back to last night. The President's State of the Nation address was delayed by over an hour last night amid chaotic scenes in Parliament. There were countless points of order brought mainly by the EFF that delayed the entire proceedings. Parliamentary Speaker Baleka Mbete eventually summoned the guards, the parliamentary guards that is, to eject the EFF, and most of the opposition walked out. When his speech got underway, President Zuma promised a radical economic transformation.
Let us unite in driving radical economic transformation for the good of our country.
It was no secret that President Zuma's State of the Nation address would dwell on the economy. 22 years later, ownership patterns remain largely in favor of the minority, and the majority is still struggling to make ends meet. And his government is tackling the situation head-on.
There can be no sustainability in any economy if the majority is excluded in this manner. In my discussions with the business community, they accepted these transformation imperatives.
And big construction companies who normally get fingered for collusion will be compelled to subcontract small black companies. And legislation to unlock economic potential is being brought in.
As a start, the new regulations making it compulsory for big constructors to subcontract 30% of business to black-owned enterprises have been finalized and were gazetted on the 20th of January.
As the information plays an important role in today's livelihoods, the President hinted at lowering data costs.
We assure the youth that the lowering of the cost of data is uppermost in our policies and plans.
The process to expedite land reform was also high on the speech, but he's referred the bill on expropriation of land back to Parliament. There are concerns on inadequate public participation.
I have now decided to refer the bill back to Parliament for reconsideration on the basis that the bill might not pass constitutional muster.
The President has also emphasized his administration's resolve to address student funding challenges. Last year saw mass protests over funding of higher education.
As soon as the broadest sections of our society agree on what to do, our government will take steps to prioritize resources to implement it on a phased basis.
The crime was also highlighted. The President also announced that Mpumalanga province will also get its own high court. Last year, Limpopo province had its own high court officially opened.
The coming into operation of these two high courts means that we have now realized the goal of high court in every province of the country.
The President may have hit the right notes on key issues aimed at transforming the country's economy, but many will be watching whether the words are matched by actions. Mzwandile Mbethe, SABC News, Parliament.
A public memorial service will be held for South African rugby legend Joos van der Westhuizen at Loftus Versfeld in Pretoria today. Now, it will start at 12:30 and will be broadcast live on the SABC's Channel 404, this very same channel, your favorite channel on DSTV. Speakers that will feature during the service include the Sports Minister, Fikile Mbalula, the 1995 Rugby World Cup winning captain, Francois Pienaar, and the World Rugby Chairman, Bill Beaumont. There will also be some music. Musician PJ Powers and other performers will be part of the program. The 1995 Rugby World Cup winning team will also be in attendance at the memorial service. Now, a little bit later, Kendall Makamata will bring you up to speed with what's happening, and our reporter is sports reporter on the scene as well to give you an update as to what is happening at Loftus Versfeld. So you have to stay tuned. Let's move on now to news abroad, where the United States President Donald Trump has promised a legal battle after a federal appeals court refused to restore his controversial executive order on immigration. A defiant Trump quickly pledged to battle on, tweeting within minutes of the decision, "See you in court. The security of our nation is at stake." Now, the Justice Department had asked the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals to restore the measure on an emergency basis, but the three-judge panel instead maintained the suspension ordered by a federal judge in Seattle. Trump's decree summarily denied entry to all refugees for 120 days and travelers from Iran, Iraq, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, Syria and Yemen for 90 days. Refugees from Syria were blocked indefinitely. Now, the case could end up in the Supreme Court, and we'll keep you updated on that story as we conclude. That's your news for now. Let's now go over to a story which will affect you dramatically. By May 2018, all workers in South Africa will have to earn a minimum of 3,500 Rand a month. The newly signed National Minimum Wage Agreement provides for workers to be paid at least 20 Rand per hour. Government says while there are concerns that jobs will be lost in the process, the move will fight poverty and restore the dignity of lowly paid workers. Now, to get a further perspective, we are joined from our Seapoint studios by Gilat Isaacs from the National Minimum Wage Research Initiative, School of Economics and Business Sciences at Wits University. A very good morning to you and welcome.
Thanks very much.
Mr. Isaacs, there are fears that the current minimum wage will lead to an increase of unemployment in the country. What's your thoughts?
I think we need to see the minimum wage in the same light as your previous segment. Not only do we have issues of ownership and participation in the economy, but we also have a legacy of extreme wage inequality. The top 10% of full-time workers earn 82 times more than those at the bottom 10%. And the national minimum wage is one intervention which seeks to intervene and address this issue. What we've seen globally is that such minimum wages have a very strong and significant impact in tackling both poverty and inequality. And that's really what is motivating this intervention. As to the employment impact, the international evidence is unequivocal that minimum wage and moderate minimum wage increases have a small or negligible and often statistically undetectable impact on employment. Our statistical modeling research in South Africa shows something very similar. And this is because firms in the economy adjust in multiple ways, increases in productivity, small increases in prices, a reduction in profit margins, a reduction in upper end wages, and importantly, a potential that increased spending at the lower end can actually spur demand in the economy and thus have a positive macroeconomic impact. So whilst an individual firm may find this difficult, what we normally see is a reallocation of employment within the economy and a potential overall economic boost.
What I hear from you, it sounds like that it will create also labor stability. But just how important is this minimum wage in bringing bridging the economic divide and boosting spending power of the consumers?
You know, this is a modest labor market intervention which exists in the majority of countries under the International Labour Organization. So I don't think a minimum wage at this modest level will have a revolutionary impact on the economy. But what it will do is bring workers closer to meeting their basic needs. It still falls under those basic needs. Our research shows that as of October last year, average worker needed 4,480 Rand to meet the most basic needs of themselves and those relying on them. As to the macroeconomic impact, which we've seen elsewhere in the world, our statistical estimates show a modest increase that without a national minimum wage of this level, we'd see an average GDP growth in the next 10 years at about 2.1%, and with this intervention, that could rise to about 2.4, 2.5%. So it does highlight the potential for a consumption-based demand stimulus, but that would need to be complemented by a range of other measures in the economy, both to increase employment, which a national minimum wage is not about increasing employment, and other measures to increase demand and output in the economy.
Just finally, in his own address last night, the president said, and I quote, that government will play a key role in the economy and drive transformation with a commitment really to change the fundamental structure of the country's economic patterns and ownership. Radical economic transformation must be implemented, he said, with systems, structures, institutions and patterns of ownership, management and control of the economy that need to change in order to favor all South Africans, especially the poor, and the majority of whom are African and female. Now, close quote, is that perhaps a commitment, perhaps, that this is the solution to a better life for South Africans in 15 seconds?
I think it is a step in that, and the workers covered by this are the most marginalized, the majority of which are poor black Africans and women in particular.
Thank you so much, Mr. Gilad Isaacs. He's from the National Minimum Wage. There's a lot more to ask you, but thank you so much for your time and joining us from the Minimum Wage Research Initiative, the School of Economic and Business Sciences at Wits University. Unfortunately, we ran out of time, but it's a very interesting discussion we had there. We'll take a short break. We'll be right back after that.
What is a national anthem and why do we need national anthems?
A national anthem becomes an instrument to foster social cohesion, identity, to create a sense of identity of a country.
It does happen that people feel that they cannot commit to what the national anthem does.
Unity is not formed from the sky. People don't just despise the national anthem, but it is because of certain things that are actually happening. The issue of languages, for instance. The issue of apartheid statues and monuments.
A top 5 rated horse racing event in the world, fashion is a highlight for those in attendance. All decked out in blue and white, the Lomorians Queen Plate is the premier event that kicked off everyone's social calendar.
That it was all part of my master plan to cast John Legend, but deprive him of his normal instrument and give that one to Ryan.
The House of Truth is not just a name. It is a religion. It is a lifestyle. It is a conviction that drives us.
What really excites me is how people have kept it very simple and also played with the theme, and how each person has interpreted it in their own way.
To stay updated with all the current entertainment news, tune into Trends every Saturday from 12 to 1.
All South Africans travelling to New Zealand and all New Zealanders travelling to South Africa must now apply for the appropriate visas, bringing to an end a 10-year visa-free travel agreement between the two countries. Did you know that? Were you aware of that? But many regular and prospective travellers were caught by surprise as they were unaware to the changes. Now, to avoid further challenges, joining us now in studio is the Immigration and Citizenship Law Specialist at De Saude Attorneys Incorporated, Stephanie De Saude. A very good morning to you and welcome.
Good morning, Elvis. Thank you for having me.
First and foremostly, Stephanie, can you give us an idea of the amount of South Africans that travel to New Zealand every year and how many New Zealanders are coming here?
Well, De Saude Attorney specializes in assisting foreigners traveling to South Africa. So we don't do the outbound. I would be assisting New Zealanders traveling to South Africa. But having said that, over the last 12 years, I would say, I've received a number of inquiries from South Africans wanting to immigrate. And I can comfortably say that I've never received a call from any South African wanting to go to New Zealand, which is probably why we did reciprocate with the visa exemption withdrawal.
Mm-hmm. So what brought about the decision to implement this travel visas for those traveling between South Africa and New Zealand? Is that because of what you're saying, that there's not too many South Africans traveling to New Zealand?
Well, no, not directly. We were told last year by the New Zealand government that they were going to withdraw the exemption applicable to South Africans. That from, I think, November last year, South Africans needed a visa to travel to New Zealand, and the reasons we were given were because many South Africans were overstaying the entry visa, and also because many South Africans tried to enter New Zealand with fraudulent passports. And our government retaliated. They responded by saying that, well, we'd reciprocate and we'd withdraw the exemption applicable to New Zealand citizens as well. But I think that if it was in South Africa's best interest to not do that, I don't think we would have done that. Mm-hmm. So I don't think many South Africans travel to New Zealand, no.
Now, the people that is overstaying...
Well, at least not for long periods.
Yes. So. Now, the people that's overstaying in New Zealand, have they been identified and have they been deported back to South Africa, or are there still ongoing investigations around these South Africans?
I'm certain that there are ongoing investigations, although I'm sure that people who have been identified would be dealt with. I'm sure most of them would have been sent back. And again, I say this just based on our immigration rules, that if people are identified for overstaying, there is a process for them returning, and it's usually a voluntary deportation or a deportation notice.
Mm-hmm. Now, can you clarify us just for us the requirements? Do both South Africans then, as well as New Zealanders, now need a visa? And are there different kinds of visas, for example, work, general tourism, and those visiting families?
Yes. Okay, so there are different kinds of visas available depending on what it is you'd like to do. There are entry visa, there are holiday visas for short-term periods. In South Africa, for New Zealanders, there's short-term holiday visas for up to 90 days at a time. And I would assume that it works the same both ways. Also, if anyone wants to work, study, or live in either country permanently, they need to qualify, they need to comply with the requirements. From my understanding, most of the South Africans who travel to New Zealand and New Zealanders who travel to South Africa are usually for short-term periods. So it's usually for visitor visas up to 90 days. And the requirements are very clear in law. The issue really, the problem, the challenges are, and that's where we would come in, and this is why we exist really, are to address those challenges, and that's in applying for those visas. The law is very clear. The application of the law is not always as straightforward as it should be, and the processing times are usually an issue because people don't realize they need to apply timeously.
What are the regulations when it comes to dual citizenship between the two countries?
Well, citizenship is a different issue to immigration. So South Africa generally is not against dual or multiple nationalities. However, if a South African acquires a foreign nationality by some formal and voluntary act other than marriage whilst being a major, the South African will need to get the minister's prior written consent. So for South Africans, it's possible to acquire New Zealand citizenship, again, unless they qualify. Mm-hmm. And that, of course, would, if you're a citizen, you don't need a visa to travel to the country.
Just briefly, Stephanie, your advice to people traveling to New Zealand or New Zealanders coming here?
Well, I think that people would need to plan now. It's not as straightforward as just, booking the flight and traveling. They'd need to make the arrangements beforehand. They'd need to make inquiries on where to apply, how long in advance to apply. And that's the biggest problem, as I said. Usually people think they can apply 5 days in advance. That's not the case. They should at least apply 2 months before. And again, the foreign mission, the South African High Commission in Wellington, usually, most missions, in fact, don't accept or take calls between 8 and 2 in the morning or 8 and 12 because they're busy accepting applications. People need to be aware of this. So to avoid unnecessary long trips to the High Commission, to ensure that they know what the requirements are, to prepare the application, and again, apply timeously, long before their trip.
Stephanie, I thank you so much for your time. Muito obrigado, senhorita.
You're welcome. Muito obrigado. Thank you.
That was immigration and citizenship law specialist at the Saude Attorneys Incorporated, Stephanie de Saude. That's where we got to leave it for now. Kendall is standing by with your sports news after this.
To attend US Van der Westhuizen's memorial service at the Loftus Versfeld Stadium. Now, throughout the course of the week, messages of condolences have been streaming in from all quarters. We heard earlier from Simon that media from around the world has converged on Loftus to cover the service. Now, Simon Burke is still at Loftus Versfeld to bring us up to speed with what's going on. I see, Simon, you moved into the stadium itself, and there are some people already there. Can you bring us up to speed with what's been happening since we last spoke?
Yeah, well, Kendall, as you can see behind me on the main grandstand in Loftus Versfeld, there's a smattering of people. They've been steadily coming into the stadium, all dressed in their green and gold or the light blue of the Blue Bulls, the team from Pretoria, the team that US Van der Westhuizen played for in the stadium in front of the main grandstand where he made his name and brought everyone to their feet. Now it's a day for respect. And I suppose as people come home, get off work, wrap up for the week, they will also be making their way through. As I said, it's not a vast crowd, but it is a steady stream of people coming in. There's still a good few, about 50 minutes to go before
All right, clearly we've just lost our audio link to what Simon Burke is saying to us right now, but I'll tell you what, we will be trying to make sure that we stay close to what Simon has got to say, because you can see he was mentioning that there are lots of people in their light blue Bulls jerseys as well as their Springbok jerseys. We will definitely be back to chat to Simon Burke, but what we do have for you for now is we can bring you some stories from the world of golf, for example, because one of the things that's been happening today is that the annual Presidential Fund Raising Golf Tournament, which takes place every year after SONA, is expected to kick off any minute from now. Our presidential reporter Mzwandile Mbeje earlier spoke to the Minister of Public Service and Administration, who explained the importance of the tournament.
Thank you very much, Minister. You are here as part of the Presidential Golf Tournament that happens every after post-SONA. So just bring us up to speed insofar as what normally happens, what is the intention for this?
I'm actually the host. DPSA is hosting this function as a ministry under the presidency. And basically, this occasion is about assisting the young people who otherwise would not be able to go to school. So it's a fundraising occasion. Of course, we enjoy the golf, those who can play, and those of us who are playing a little less also admire the shots of those who can hit furthest and whatever. Now, the president, as an MEC in KZN of Economic Development, established the Jacob Zuma RDP Education Trust. This was born out of his experience as a young man who grew up without the opportunity to go to school. And he experienced difficulties in the course of his life, and that made him to have empathy with the young people who came from backgrounds such as his. Now, as soon as the opportunity presented itself, He remembered where he came from and remembered the kids who would be in the same situation and established this trust. As we speak, more than 2,500 students have gone through education funded by this trust. Yeah, last year, I think they produced their first PhD student, graduate. Now, this is a colossal, monumental contribution to the future of this country. Because if you invest in the youth, you are investing in the future. And I come in there with the passion, having the same background as our president. My parents never went to school, and I had to struggle through high school, work as a child laborer, and got lifted by other people. Somebody giving you books, somebody giving you uniform, and this. So you can make a difference in the life of the child. And I am saying, calling to South Africans, please come to the show, join us, join the president's initiative. Let's support the child, because we are supporting the future.
Now, a little earlier, we were with Simon Burke, who was out at Loftus Versfeld. Just bring us up to speed with what's going on out there. Now, we have re-established that link. And Simon, I see there's a motorcade that's pulling in just outside the grounds, in fact, within the precinct itself. Can you tell us a little bit more where and what is going on? Who do you think might be arriving? Who else are we expecting?
Well, we're expecting all the rugby players that played with US Van der Westhuizen and all the Springbok captains and people who can make it up to Pretoria on such short notice. You must understand this was a spontaneous event. He passed away on Monday, and there wasn't much time to get things underway and organized. But what has been organized, they secured Loftus Stadium. The grandstand is there for anybody to come and sit in. And dignitaries are arriving, past rugby players, people that just played with his contemporaries in the game. And they're all lining up and getting ready to say their farewell. This memorial service, the public memorial service, starts at 12:30. And let's just take a look at the grandstand. It's getting there. It's a sweltering day here in Pretoria. The heat is quite stifling. It's in the mid-30s. And people are still getting off work and wrapping up their working weeks with a hope to get out to the stadium and to pay their respects.
Simon, one of the things that's come out during the course of the week was the fact that nobody's ever really been able to identify exactly what causes motor neuron disease. Some people could say it could be the impact on his body through the sport. However, it has also been pointed out that many people who don't take part in impact sports do get to develop motor neuron disease. And I see right now we've got shots of the family that are arriving outside. Simon, while you give us an answer of what's been happening with the J9 Foundation and their research, our viewers can definitely see shots of the family outside. Can you give us what you think is going to be happening with research around motor neuron disease going forward?
Well, it really was Joost's J9 Foundation and himself as well being put forward to take part in all sorts of experimental treatments because they cannot find a cure and they cannot find the cause to this disease. It seems to strike down strong people, but that's just the sportsman. There are some interesting statistics going around. An Italian footballer is 6 times more likely than your average Italian to be struck down by this motor neuron disease. And obviously, Joost contracted the harshest strain, the ALS strain, which in common parlance has been referred to before as the Lou Gehrig disease, in memory of a famous baseballer in America who first contracted the disease. And that's essentially what people who are looking into research have been doing, is using these big-name celebrities to try and get some sort of funding going. And Joost was very good with that, with the J9 Foundation, and also with traveling the world, going on road shows when he shouldn't have been out and about and traveling and was barely able to. He was putting himself forward. He wanted people to know more about this disease, and he wanted to help try and find a cure for this disease. And as you can see from the shots at Loftus, it's a quiet day here. Everybody's very solemn because it took 6 years for him. He was fighting and fighting and fighting for 6 years. And finally, on Monday, he succumbed to this dreadful illness. People have mooted that perhaps it was because of contact sports. And yes, there has been a trend it was prevalent in rugby players and American football players. But then again, people also said it could be exposure to green grass, to the color green, to pesticides, insecticides in the lawns that these guys play on week in, week out. No one's any the wiser, and we can't really draw conclusions.
Simon, thank you so much for that. We're going to leave you be so you can carry on with the rest of your morning and the rest of the work that you need to do. We certainly hope that everything goes smoothly out there at Loftus Versfeld. There you have it. Simon Burke, our reporter out at Loftus Versfeld, covering the memorial service for US van Westhuizen, fallen hero, fallen Springbok icon. A couple of tweets from you. We've got Kuzo 2.0. Rest in peace, US. You guys made me fall in love with rugby, and you will never forget first love. Rest in peace. Jennifer Nsabumba says, you were the greatest rugby player of my time. And G-Max says, wearing my green and gold to work today, honoring an incredible rugby player, one of the best, gave me plenty of amazing memories. Rest in peace, US. And the last one I'm going to bring you today is this photograph of these fans, these Springbok fans, these US fans, young ones. Beautiful stuff. And that is how we leave it today. US van Westhuizen in our memories. May he rest in peace. His memorial service is currently on at Loftus Versfeld. If you've got time, make sure you get there. It starts at 12:30. They'll be there till 3:30. So see if you can get yourself to Pretoria, Loftus Versfeld, to celebrate the life and memory of the great Springbok icon. My name is Kenan Makamati. That's why I sign off. We'll be back next week. Until then, this is SABC.